The loudest danger of the coming year will not be chaos, collapse, or catastrophe. It will be something far more subtle and therefore far more dangerous: the quiet erosion of meaning. Human beings have always feared noise, explosions, revolutions, crises that rupture daily life. Noise triggers survival instincts, it forces attention. But meaning rarely disappears in moments of panic. It dissolves slowly, almost politely, while people are distracted elsewhere. Meaning is not lost when libraries burn. It is lost when libraries still stand, but no one enters them. It is not destroyed when ideas are forbidden, but when they are tolerated and then ignored. A society can survive ignorance for a time, but it cannot survive indifference toward understanding. When meaning erodes, people continue to function, work, vote, consume, and argue. Yet they no longer know why they are doing any of it. This erosion does not announce itself. There is no headline declaring that significance has been downgraded. Instead, explanations become shorter, conversations shallower, and questions increasingly unwelcome. Complexity begins to feel like a burden. Nuance is treated as hesitation. Reflection is mistaken for weakness. Over time, depth itself becomes suspicious. In such an environment, information does not disappear, it multiplies. Facts become abundant, but frameworks for interpreting them decay. People are surrounded by data yet starved of meaning. When everything is available, nothing feels essential. The result is not confusion but fatigue, and fatigue is fertile ground for manipulation. The human brain evolved to search for meaning, not for endless streams of information. When it cannot find coherence, it substitutes emotion. Fear, outrage, and certainty rush in to fill the vacuum left by understanding. This is why the erosion of meaning rarely leads to silence. It leads to noise, but a noise that conceals emptiness rather than revealing truth. The danger, then, is not that people will stop talking. It is that they will stop listening in order to understand. They will listen only to confirm what they already feel. In this condition, words lose weight. Promises lose consequence. Even lies become unnecessary, because meaning itself has thinned to the point where accuracy no longer matters. This is not an accident. Systems built to optimize attention are indifferent to meaning. They measure success in clicks, shares, and reactions, not in comprehension. They reward immediacy over insight and repetition over originality. Over time, what survives is not what explains the world best, but what travels fastest through it. The erosion of meaning does not require censorship. It thrives in environments that appear open and free. When everything can be said, but nothing is examined carefully, meaning dissolves on its own. The loudest voices dominate not because they are wiser, but because they are simpler. And simplicity, when unearned, is seductive. This is why education alone is not enough. Knowledge without context does not create understanding. Literacy without critical thinking does not protect truth. A society can be highly educated and still lose its grip on meaning if it no longer values depth, patience, and intellectual humility. The second danger follows naturally from the first. When meaning erodes, contempt rises. Contempt replaces violence as the primary weapon against wisdom. It is cheaper, safer, and far more socially acceptable. Violence provokes resistance. Contempt provokes silence. Contempt does not argue. It dismisses. It does not need to prove anything wrong. It only needs to make it appear irrelevant. A thoughtful idea does not have to be refuted if it can be ridiculed. A careful thinker does not need to be imprisoned if they can be portrayed as disconnected, slow, or naive. Historically, societies feared their wisest members enough to either revere or suppress them. Today, fear has been replaced by amusement. Wisdom is tolerated as a curiosity, like an antique tool displayed behind glass, interesting but no longer useful. This is a far more effective way to neutralize it. Contempt thrives in environments where speed is valued more than accuracy. Wisdom takes time. It hesitates. It asks questions that do not produce immediate answers. In contrast, contempt is instantaneous. It comes with a sneer, a label, a meme. It feels decisive, and decisiveness is often mistaken for intelligence. Once contempt becomes the dominant response to depth, public discourse changes shape. People learn, often unconsciously, which ideas are rewarded and which are punished. They notice that certainty spreads faster than curiosity, and that mockery earns more attention than reflection. Over time, many stop expressing thoughtful ideas, not because they have changed their minds, but because the social cost has become too high. This does not mean wisdom disappears. It retreats, it becomes private. It survives in small circles, in careful conversations, in silence. But when wisdom withdraws from public life, power is left unchecked. Decisions affecting millions are made without serious reflection. Because reflection has been culturally devalued, contempt is particularly dangerous because it feels moral. It convinces people that dismissing others is a form of intelligence. It replaces the hard work of understanding with the easy pleasure of superiority. And once contempt is normalized, it spreads downward. Those mocked today will mock others tomorrow. The result is not debate, but a hierarchy of dismissal. In such a world, truth does not lose because it is false. It loses because it is inconvenient. Wisdom does not fail because it lacks evidence. It fails because it lacks spectacle. And when spectacle becomes the currency of public life, meaning becomes optional. The challenge is that contempt rarely sees itself as contempt. It presents itself as realism, pragmatism, or irony. It claims to be immune to illusion while quietly surrendering to shallowness. Those who wield it often believe they are resisting manipulation, when in fact they are participating in a system that discourages understanding. The erosion of meaning and the rise of contempt reinforce each other. When meaning fades, contempt fills the void, and when contempt spreads, meaning becomes harder to sustain. This feedback loop does not require malicious intent. It operates automatically, driven by incentives rather than ideology. Breaking this cycle does not begin with louder voices or sharper insults. It begins with the unfashionable act of taking ideas seriously again, even when they are uncomfortable, slow, or complex. It requires resisting the impulse to dismiss before understanding. It requires patience in a culture that rewards immediacy. Education, at its best, is not the transmission of facts, but the cultivation of attention. Attention to evidence. Attention to context. Attention to the limits of one's own knowledge. Without this, societies become highly informed yet profoundly unwise. The coming year will not punish humanity with disaster. It will test it with boredom, distraction, and dismissal. The real question is not whether information will continue to flow. It will. The question is whether meaning will still be allowed to take root and whether wisdom will be granted the dignity of being taken seriously. Because once a society learns to treat wisdom with contempt, it does not become freer or stronger. It becomes noisier, faster, and emptier. And it may not notice the loss until it no longer remembers what meaning felt like. In the coming years, the most influential ideas will not be defeated in open debate. They will simply vanish from public attention. This disappearance will not feel dramatic. No one will declare a ban. No authority will announce that certain thoughts are no longer allowed. Instead, thoughtful voices will sink quietly beneath waves of faster, louder, and more emotionally charged content. Those who think deeply will still be free to speak, but freedom without attention is an empty privilege. When ideas are no longer heard, they effectively cease to exist in the shared reality of society. Human history teaches that power does not only belong to those who control armies or laws. Power increasingly belongs to those who control attention. In earlier centuries, a philosopher could influence the future, with a book read slowly by a few thousand people. Today, a message competes with millions of others every second. In such an environment, wisdom does not lose because it is wrong, but because it is slow. It asks for time, patience, and cognitive effort. Resources that modern systems are designed to exhaust. Digital platforms reward reactions, not reflection. They elevate statements that trigger fear, anger, or tribal loyalty. Nuance, by contrast, appears weak in a landscape optimized for certainty. When a careful thinker admits doubt, the system interprets it as a lack of confidence. When a scholar explains complexity, the system reduces it to irrelevance. Over time, the architecture of information itself begins to favor shallow certainty over deep understanding. This does not require malicious intent. No conspiracy is necessary. The burial of wisdom is an emergent property of systems built to maximize engagement. Content that provokes outrage spreads faster than content that provokes thought. Simplistic narratives travel farther than complicated truths. As a result, public discourse becomes less about understanding reality and more about performing identity. People do not ask, "Is this true?" They ask, "Does this affirm who I am and who I oppose?" In such a world, thinkers face a subtle form of exile. They are not expelled from society, but from relevance. Their work circulates in small, disconnected circles, while mass attention flows elsewhere. Over time, this creates a dangerous illusion, the illusion that wisdom no longer exists. In reality, it is still present, but it has been pushed into the margins, stripped of its ability to guide collective decisions. The consequences are profound. When societies lose contact with their most careful thinkers, they do not become ignorant overnight. They become overconfident. They mistake repetition for truth and visibility for importance. They begin to believe that what is most shared must be most accurate, and what is most emotional must be most real. This is how intelligent societies make foolish decisions, not because they lack knowledge, but because they lack listening. Alongside this burial of thoughtful voices comes a second equally corrosive process, the drowning of truth in indifference. In the past, truth was often attacked directly. Lies confronted facts in open conflict. Propaganda attempted to replace reality with fiction. Today, something more subtle is happening. Truth is not always denied, it is simply rendered irrelevant. When everything is framed as opinion, nothing feels solid. When every claim is met with endless counterclaims, people stop asking what is true and start asking what is useful. Truth becomes just another tool in political or cultural competition. Not a shared foundation for understanding the world. In such conditions, falsehood does not need to win. It only needs to exhaust. Indifference is more powerful than censorship. A censored truth still has meaning because it threatens those in power. An ignored truth has no such power. It exists, but it does not matter. When societies grow indifferent to truth, they lose the ability to coordinate action, to trust institutions, and to plan for the future. Without shared facts, there can be no shared responsibility. This indifference is reinforced by constant information overload. Humans are not built to process infinite streams of data. When overwhelmed, the mind protects itself not by thinking harder, but by caring less. People scroll past wars, climate reports, economic warnings, and humanitarian crises with the same numb gesture. Everything becomes background noise. The brain adapts by disengaging. As a result, truth competes not only with lies, but with fatigue. Even accurate information struggles to survive in an environment where attention is scarce and emotional energy is depleted. This is not because people no longer value truth, but because they no longer feel capable of acting on it. When action feels impossible, caring feels pointless. Over time, this leads to a quiet moral shift. People stop demanding truth from leaders, institutions, and media. They settle for stories that comfort, entertain, or confirm existing beliefs. Accountability weakens, not because lies are believed, but because they are tolerated. When falsehoods provoke no outrage and truths provoke no response, the distinction between them begins to blur. This is particularly dangerous in moments of global crisis. Complex challenges, such as climate change, technological disruption, and geopolitical instability, require long-term thinking and collective discipline. They demand attention to uncomfortable facts and willingness to delay gratification. A society that drowns truth in indifference cannot meet such challenges. It reacts instead of planning, consumes instead of conserving, and polarizes instead of cooperating. The tragedy is that this erosion often feels like freedom. People celebrate the endless choice of narratives, the ability to ignore inconvenient facts, the power to curate their own reality. But a shared illusion of choice is not genuine freedom. True freedom depends on the ability to understand the world accurately. Without that understanding, choices are guided not by knowledge, but by manipulation and habit. In this environment, education itself is transformed. Learning becomes less about developing critical thinking and more about acquiring marketable signals. Knowledge is valued for its utility, not its truth. Students are trained to perform competence rather than cultivate wisdom. The result is a generation fluent in information yet uncertain about meaning. Still, this trajectory is not inevitable. The burial of wisdom and the drowning of truth are processes, not destinies. They can be slowed, resisted, and partially reversed, but only if individuals recognize the cost of indifference. Attention is a moral resource. Where we direct it shapes the future. Choosing to listen carefully, to tolerate complexity, and to sit with uncertainty becomes a quiet form of resistance. The challenge ahead is not merely technological or political, it is psychological. Can humans remain attentive in a world designed to distract? Can they value truth in a culture that rewards speed over accuracy? Can they respect wisdom, even when it does not entertain? These questions will define the coming years. Not with drama or spectacle, but with countless small decisions made every day. What to read, what to share, what to ignore, and what to take seriously. Civilization rarely collapses from a single blow. More often, it erodes when people stop noticing what truly matters. Wisdom has never promised comfort. It has never offered popularity, safety, or immediate reward. In earlier centuries, wisdom often stood beside power, advising kings, shaping laws, and guiding civilizations through moments of crisis. Today, wisdom stands elsewhere. It stands alone. And in the coming year, endurance, not brilliance, will become its defining quality. To endure in 2026 will not mean surviving physical hardship. It will mean surviving psychological pressure. The pressure of being constantly evaluated, ranked, reacted to, and dismissed in spaces designed for speed, rather than reflection. Wisdom will be tested not by arguments, but by exhaustion. Not by opposition, but by neglect. The demand will be simple and relentless, simplify or disappear. Endurance in this sense is not passive. It is an active resistance against the architecture of distraction. Every platform, every feed, every automated system is optimized to fragment attention, to shorten memory, and to reward immediacy. Wisdom, by contrast, moves slowly. It requires time, context, and an uncomfortable tolerance for uncertainty. In 2026, choosing to think carefully will feel like swimming against a current that never rests. Those who endure will do so without external validation. The metrics of success will be misleading. The most shared ideas will not be the most accurate. The most confident voices will not be the most informed. And the most visible figures will not be the most thoughtful. Endurance will therefore require an internal compass, one that does not rely on likes, followers, or applause to confirm its direction. This endurance will also demand humility. Wisdom in the coming year will not come from claiming certainty, but from maintaining openness while others demand simple answers. It will mean admitting what is not yet known, even when uncertainty is treated as weakness. It will mean holding space for contradiction in a culture that prefers slogans. This kind of endurance is quiet, often invisible, and frequently misunderstood. Yet history suggests that endurance is precisely how wisdom survives periods of decay. When institutions weaken and public discourse becomes shallow, it is not the loudest ideas that endure, but the most resilient ones. They persist in classrooms, in long-form conversations, in careful research, and in the private discipline of thinking honestly. Endurance allows wisdom to outlast trends, outrun misinformation, and remain intact long after the noise has faded. The temptation in 2026 will be to retreat, to withdraw from public thinking altogether. Many intelligent people will choose silence, not because they lack insight, but because the cost of being thoughtful appears too high. Endurance does not necessarily mean constant expression. It means refusing to abandon clarity, even when choosing when and how to speak becomes a strategic decision. Wisdom endures not by shouting continuously, but by remaining available when it is most needed. As endurance becomes essential, another quality will quietly determine the future: the ability to think clearly while being dismissed. This is a rare discipline. Human psychology is deeply sensitive to social rejection. To be ignored triggers doubt. To be ridiculed triggers anger. To be dismissed triggers silence. The coming year will amplify all three. Algorithms will decide relevance, crowds will decide credibility, and speed will decide truth. In such an environment, clarity becomes an act of defiance. Thinking clearly while being dismissed requires separating truth from approval. It demands the capacity to evaluate ideas based on evidence and coherence rather than reception. This is difficult because humans evolved to survive in groups, not to stand apart from them. In earlier eras, exile meant death. Today, dismissal feels symbolic, but the emotional circuitry is the same. The brain interprets being ignored as danger. The wisest minds in 2026 will therefore have to retrain their instincts. They will need to tolerate invisibility without assuming irrelevance. They will need to accept misinterpretation without surrendering precision. And they will need to continue refining their thinking even when no audience appears to be listening. This is especially challenging in an age where feedback is constant and quantified. When every idea is immediately reacted to, silence feels like failure. Silence may simply mean that an idea is ahead of its time, too complex for rapid consumption, or resistant to easy categorization. Clear thinking does not always translate into immediate influence. Often, it operates underground, shaping frameworks rather than headlines. Being dismissed also tests emotional discipline. Contempt, when encountered repeatedly, invites resentment. Resentment, in turn, clouds judgment. The challenge is not merely intellectual, it is emotional. To think clearly, one must resist the urge to retaliate, to oversimplify in response, or to abandon nuance for the sake of recognition. Clarity requires calm, and calm is increasingly rare. The future will not be shaped solely by those who dominate attention, but by those who preserve understanding. Policies, technologies, and ideologies are eventually built on frameworks of thought, even when the thinkers behind those frameworks remain unseen. Their influence endures. The ability to think clearly while being dismissed ensures that when moments of decision arise, there is still a reservoir of insight to draw from. Education in this context is no longer just about acquiring knowledge. It is about cultivating resilience of thought. It is about teaching minds to remain coherent under pressure, to distinguish between noise and signal, and to maintain ethical reasoning in environments that reward manipulation. The educational challenge of 2026 is not access to information, but protection of attention and integrity of judgment. Those who master this discipline will not necessarily lead movements or command crowds. They will do something quieter and more important. They will prevent collapse from becoming irreversible. They will slow the erosion of meaning. They will keep alive the possibility that reason, empathy, and long-term thinking can still guide human choices. The paradox of the coming year is that wisdom will feel weaker precisely when it is most necessary. Its power will not lie in visibility but in continuity, not in persuasion but in preservation, not in winning arguments but in sustaining understanding. To endure without applause and to think clearly without recognition is not a glamorous task. It is not rewarded by systems designed for spectacle, but it is how civilizations survive transitions they do not yet fully understand. In 2026, the wisest individuals may feel marginal. History suggests that this is often the position from which the future is quietly shaped. In the end, the true measure of this moment will not be how loudly ideas competed, but which ones remained intact. When attention fractured and contempt spread easily, what mattered was not who dominated the conversation, but who protected meaning from erosion. The future is not built by the fastest reactions or the sharpest mockery, but by sustained understanding. Clarity, patience, and depth may appear fragile in times like these, yet they are the only forces that quietly outlast confusion. If wisdom seems slow, it is because it is designed for the long term. And when the noise finally subsides, it is careful thought, not spectacle, that remains standing. Thank you for giving your time and attention. In an age where focus is rare and distraction is endless, your willingness to listen, reflect, and think deeply is not passive. It is an act of responsibility.
I read in an interview that you gave The Guardian, they asked you the greatest regret of your life. And you said not being open about your sexuality earlier.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Why it's my biggest regret?
Yes.
Or why? Because I think that the pain of kind of living in denial to myself. I mean, when I say it's a regret not coming out, it's not to other people, it's to myself. And, looking back, the writing was on the wall when I was like 14, 15, for sure. Like, if I would be on the beach, I would definitely look at the guys, not at the girls. But I couldn't acknowledge it. Like, I had a divided mind that one part of the mind knew absolutely 100%, and the other part of the mind had absolutely no idea. And again, it was just too much to handle, I guess. But this situation of living in denial and in repression of myself, just looking back, it was a lot of painful years. Once an entity has the capacity to suffer, it enters the ethical realm. It becomes an ethical subject. To burn a chair is not an ethical issue because the chair can't suffer. When you harm an animal, a sentient being, this is an ethical issue because it can suffer. And there are so many political discussions which revolve around that. For instance, the whole discussion of abortion. It's not the only issue, but a very central issue. Are fetuses conscious? Can they suffer or not? Are they ethical subjects in their own right or not? The same with animal rights. Can cows suffer? Can chickens suffer? Can fish suffer? And so forth. There is this naive expectation that if a network spreads bad information, fake news, conspiracy theories, it will destroy itself. And this is not the case. Some of the most powerful networks in history were completely delusional, and still they were immensely powerful. Because power in history, in human societies, it can mean different things. It can be the technical power to manipulate external reality, and for instance, to create an atom bomb. To create an atom bomb, you need to know physics. If you spread lies and fictions about physics, you will not be able to build a bomb. But power in human networks also depends on the ability to get a lot of people to agree on something and cooperate on something. If you want to build an atom bomb and you just know physics, you will not succeed. You need millions of people to help you. You need people to mine uranium and to build nuclear reactors and to grow wheat and potatoes, so all the miners and the physicists will have something to eat. How do you get millions of people to cooperate? In history, it's often done with fictions, with stories, and a story doesn't need to be true in order to succeed in uniting people. To build a bomb, you need to know the truth about physics or the bomb won't explode. But a powerful story can explode even if it's based on fictions and fantasies.